vás zdravím a uvádím další rozhovor s panem Callemanem. Tady toto je vlastně první rozhovor, který proběhl ještě předtím s Ondrou Brožem a tlumočí můj syn, protože on umí anglicky dobře. No a já skoro vůbec, nebo jako rozumím nějaký slova, protože jsem se samozřejmě učila, ale angličtina mi do hlavy moc neleze, takže něco rozumím, něco ne, ale když třeba měl pan Callemanem kurzy majského kalendáře, tak i když jsem tomu nerozuměla jakoby v souvislostech, tak on tam promítal různý obrázky, což se budu já taky snažit. A já věřím, nebo věřila jsem, že mě to naleze do hlavy nějak mimo smyslově. No a možná jo, no, co já vím. Ale fakt je, že to bylo hodně vtipný, protože on měl na tom kurzu pár lidí, kteří všichni rozuměli anglicky, všichni mluvili anglicky, protože byli z anglicky mluvících zemí, ale jenom jeden tam byl vždycky se mnou. Takže ti, co rozuměli, se neúčastnili, pustili si to potom někdy jindy. A já, která jsem nerozuměla vůbec, tak jsem tam vždycky vytrvale sedávala a poslouchala. Aspoň tak vidíte, jak jsou oddaná tomu tématu. No ale pravda je, že jedna věc je číst, jedna věc je poslouchat, byť anglicky, protože to člověku osloví zase jiný závity v té hlavě a jiný způsob pochopení to přináší. A fakt je, že někteří lidi jsou víc vizuální, takže potřebují to vidět napsaný, potřebují vidět ty písmenka a čisto. Někteří jsou auditivní, takže víc naslouchají a víc se naučí tím, když poslouchají. No a někteří jsou takoví ti haptičtí, co potřebují si ty věci osahat, ohmatat, praktikovat, být vlastně v tom módu toho cvičení nebo vnímání tělem, energií. A tak, jo, čili i proto já dělám ty videa, že dělám pro lidi, kteří vnímají sluchem, vnímají líp. Třeba jsem tam nějaké ty obrázky, protože se budu snažit dávat obrázky, nemusím tam být furt já. A pro lidi, kteří třeba nemají čas číst, kteří maminky třeba doma, co jsou a žehlí, nebo nemusí být maminky, můžou to už být třeba starší ženy, který něco dělají u toho a nevím, štrikujou nebo šijou nebo něco, nebo pečou, vaří, aby si u toho něco poslechli, protože fakt času je málo. A většinou to čtení je hodně náročný, nehledě na to, že přece jenom tady na západě, jako kdyby se měnil způsob. Tady na západě, my jsme na východ od kosmického stromu, ale podléháme stále ještě tomu vlivu západu, jak kdyby se tady v tom poli něco měnilo a my se hůř učíme vlastně tím čtením. Takže proto já dělám ty videa, proto dávám i toto video, který věřím, že teda bude mít aspoň automaticky titulky, ale ještě chci říct, že jsem udělala přesný přepis se synovou pomocí a ten přepis je v článku na blogu, takže ho dám pod to video, abyste si to mohli eventuálně přečíst a zkontrolovat, jestli říká pan Callemanem pravdu, nebo já, jestli říkám pravdu, když ho někdy parafrázuju. Takže vám přeju pěkný poslech.
But I'm IT guy, so I don't know the terminology, these 9/8 and so on. So
okay, that's fine.
Tak teďka můžeš říct, že u nás jako se pomaličku vlastně dostává do povědomí ten majský kalendář i to pojetí a že lidi mají zájem o tu 9. vlnu.
Tak to je ta otázka, která?
No, řekni ten úvod, jo.
Okay, so can we start with the first question?
Yes, let's see. I guess it's being recorded now, right? Recording is on, okay?
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
We are just recording audio, so
how long approximately do you think the interview will take?
I think it's up to you. How much time do you have?
Well, no, I don't have any until several hours from now. Any. So in principle, I'm open. Okay, we'll see what it turns out then.
Zase, jak dlouho bys to tak chtěla asi, na jak dlouho bys to viděla?
Hodinu třeba?
So maybe an hour?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so maybe I can read you the question.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first question is that in our country, the number of people interested in your interpretation of the Mayan calendar, the cosmic tree, and especially the ninth wave is gradually growing.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share some of your current observations and insights on this topic?
Oops. Sorry. You might call. Okay. That's a biggie. That's a biggie, as they say. Well, it's a very big thing, of course, and you know, it's about connecting the tree of life with the 9 waves of creation, and in particular with the 9th wave of creation, and what that could mean to humanity. And then, in addition, you know, the question is about then your particular country, the Czech Republic, and its location, which is kind of interesting in this context because it's sort of on the line that separates East and West, and meaning that it must be a special way of relating to the changes that is taking place there. But let me just talk about the tree of life, which is something that's critical to understanding not only my work, the current modern work, but also critical to understanding everything that ancient peoples believed in, because the idea of a tree of life is something that you find in almost any ancient civilization or culture. There is some variation in what it means and how the tree of life looks, so to speak. Different cultures have some different things, different mythologies, and so forth. But there is also a remarkable amount of commonalities between these different cultures in how they look upon the tree of life. And this is something that I'm working quite actively right now to understand. I am working on a film project which is basically about a documentary about my work, and a big chunk of that work is about the tree of life. And what I found recently is that is something that, even though people do not really have a clear idea what the tree of life is, they still very much strongly resonate with it. They feel this is something they are connected to. And well, I think part of why it's interesting, at least part of why I'm interested in this topic, is that it is a very special place where you can connect the sort of the ancient views of some kind of what you might say living cosmic tree it's not an actual tree, of course. It's something that embraces the entire universe. And on the other hand, which for most people looks as myths, not really true, and so forth. But then this is then connected with the modern measurements, modern science. And what I'm referring to here then is that about 20 years ago, they sent out satellites in order to study what is called the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is really the first light that ever appeared in this universe. And the scientists who did this work, and this was a sort of a major collaborations of some of the most prestigious institutions working with cosmology and astrophysics. They had expected this first light not to have any identifiable structures, any lines, any axes, anything like that. They expected to see just an afterglow from a big explosion. They thought everything was kind of random, and that they didn't find. Instead they found that in the very earliest baby pictures that we can make of the universe, there are an axis, or actually several connected axes. And in other words, there is something there that science it doesn't fit. It is one of the great mysteries of science, what this axis actually is. But it is something that, in my view, is simply that they stumbled upon by a little bit like accident. They stumbled upon the cosmic tree of life, which is what should I say, a big, it's not a visible structure by itself, but you do discover axes, lines, and this is, to me, fascinating because, you know, this kind of studies that science have been engaged in for maybe 50 or 70 years has always assumed that there would not be any kind of a structure in it, and now that's clear that there is, and most likely what they stumbled upon is actually the same thing as the tree of life that the ancient peoples of our planet were in resonance with. And we're kind of, you know, if you look at the human body and its physiology, there are all these kind of branching structures, which is really typical of a tree. You know, the fingers are like, that's a branching structure. If you look at the nerve cells, you have, on the one hand, you have the spinal cord, which is a thick one, but then it branches out in very thin nerve cells. Or you can look at your pulmonary, your lungs structure. It's the same thing. The esophagus brings in the air, and then it sort of branches out into your lungs. So it seems that somehow we are, you know, as the ancient people would say, we are reflections of this tree of life. Our own structures, how we become structured, it actually has very much of a tree-like structure to it. And anyway, that tells us something important. If you agree with these kind of conclusions that I'm presenting here, and that is that we are actually cosmic beings. You know, we're not the result of some kind of a accidental chemical reactions that happened on this particular planet. No, we are intentional creations of this huge cosmic tree of life that embraces the entire universe. And we may be a very small microcosm of it, but nonetheless, it does explain a little bit how it would be that the ancient peoples, with their state of consciousness, actually could be in resonance with such a huge structure as this cosmic tree of life. Okay, so that already there, you know, if you accept these kind of arguments, then you will have to start to see that things are not random. We are here as part of a cosmic plan, or the intentions of the tree of life, or whatever. We may not ever be able to fathom and really understand in the details of how this creation works, but certainly if we are open to it and interested in how the ancient peoples looked upon it, we can start to see that we're here for a reason. It's part of a cosmic plan, and the way then, once we have this creation, or we have been created through this mechanism, then the question is, what are we to do, and how can we find out anything about what we are here to do? And it is in that regard, I think, then, that the Mayan calendar is valuable, because the various waves of creation that it describes actually points to us to help us understand that there is what is happening is not just going in circles or repeating things. Instead, there is a direction for the evolution, including a direction in which human beings are meant to evolve. And the metaphor that the Maya were using was to use the pyramids, which in their most important and most common form was 9 levels, 9 storied. And you can also think of how some of these pyramids, they have staircases, and so you make a climb of these pyramids. And what you do then is that you sort of enact the evolution of humankind through the different stages. The lowest stages then are the biological stages, and that has very much to do with the kind of things I discussed, the branching of our cells, cellular structures and so forth, that ultimately comes from the tree of life. But then once the human being is created, which basically happened about 2 million years ago, then new levels will be added to this human being. And those new levels are levels that are changing our minds, essentially, our states of consciousness. And they have a common direction. It goes through several levels that sort of help humanity evolve as a collective, you might say, and a civilized organism and so forth. But then the top level, which is I think at this particular time is really something we are meant to focus on. The top level is then the 9th wave of creation. And that wave is the wave with the highest frequency. But it does have something that makes it stand out from many other waves, you might say, from the lower waves. And for instance, then, if you look at the lower waves, usually when they begin, there is something that very strongly attracts people. Usually they can see some kind of immediate gain from themselves. The 9th wave is a little bit different because it's a wave that sort of invites us to a state of unity consciousness, where we can sort of merge the consciousness of others, and in that way creates a more sustainable unity of mind. compared to the lower levels. And it's that there is also this great potential that for humankind, not necessarily for the human individuals, but for those that are willing to sort of unify with humankind, or at least with others, and find this common ground and the common good that we can get access to through this particular ninth wave. So anyway, I don't know if this is answer to your question, but it's the answer to some question. And so let me know what's next.
Okay. So I'll try to translate some of this.
Yeah. Okay.
Mám ti to jako mluvil jste, že to nedokážu přeložit.
No, to nevadí. Řekni mě, o čem přibližně mluvil?
O tom, že co mě zaujalo nejvíc, takže vědci vyslali nějaký první světlo jako do toho, do vesmíru, a když se to vrátilo, tak se ukázalo, že to vlastně se strašně podobá tělu lidskému. A tak, to jsem si to. A teď naposledy říkal, já se nepamatuji.
Řekni naposledy, co říkal?
Že ta devátá vlna je pro nás jako velká příležitost v tom, že ne jako pro individualisty, ale jako že
pro
celkově, no, pro jako.
Tak, pak tady máme další otázku. Co predikuje majský kalendář pro příštích 5 let podle pojetí pana Callemana?
Okay, so I very simply translated your first answer. Then
Yeah.
I will translate it properly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It will be neat. It's a long story. Yes.
But it's better for you to speak.
Yeah, I think so.
At length, and then I will translate it. So the next question is, what does the Mayan calendar predict for the next 5 years?
Well, I think what is happening today is that, these different waves, they ultimately they generated by the cosmic tree of life, and then they have different characters, different qualities to them. They in other words, as they being emitted through the universe, there are different states of consciousness that are being, you must say, being downloaded by the human beings. And some of these waves are very powerful, very huge, so to speak. The 6th wave, for instance, is the wave that that created the major civilizations and so forth, and which has done for about 5,000 years, or a little bit more than that, and we have that wave. Has come to a shift point. It came to a shift point in 2011 in our regular calendar, so to speak. And what that shift point meant really was that a world that had been dominated for about 400 years. From the time period, the Mayan time periods are a little bit different. They talk about time periods that are called tunes, katuns, baktuns, piktuns, and so forth. And they're not exactly 400 years. It's a little bit less than that. But it is a very strict, very exact shift points that are being determined by these time periods. So every time you have what is called a baktun, there will be some kind of a common characteristics of that particular point in time. And so for about 400 years then, basically since 1617, there has been then a Western dominance, and also you might say it's also been a time when science has dominated the mindset of people, and that has to do with the fact that science relies on the left brain half, and the left brain half is essentially related to the Western Hemisphere, and in a sense, this has some special application to the Czech Republic. I'm thinking of the fact that the beginning of the scientific revolution really was Johannes Kepler was active in Prague exactly when this wave started, this new peak started, so to speak. But this peak has now come to an end. About 15 years ago, in 2011, that peak came to an end, and so we're going into a world where the West will no longer dominate the world. This doesn't come easily, so to speak, and especially in the United States today, where people have been sort of used to dominating the world for quite some time, will in the end, that kind of dominance will not be possible to keep it up, and the reason is that it's not really part of the cosmic plan for this to happen. And this affects a lot. Not only the sort of the global geopolitics and the relations between the major powers in the world, but it also changes how people relate to their thinking, so to speak. And we're living in a time when there's still a lot of, what should I say, remains from this sort of Western dominance time period of 400 years. But on the other hand, there is something else, more of a balance between East and West that is coming into existence. And that has some kind of a special relevance for the Czech Republic, as I said, because this peak, it started partly there, and now it's that separation between East and West has come to an end, and it also influences very much. People are not certain anymore what the truth is. What is truth? I don't know how evident that is to you, but certainly here in the United States, it's quite clear, and truth is not always honored the way it used to be. Not that people always have told the truth, but at least they've had it as an ideal. But now that is kind of on its way out. And something new is coming through this transition of in this sixth wave, and that will sort of be coexisting with the older truth, so to speak, and as that happens, there's a lot of confusion. But this is ultimately the confusion that people are having, and I'm sure is also what attracts people to understand more of the Mayan calendar at the current time, is this large-scale shifts between, you could say, two global states of consciousness. There used to be a globe where there was like a yin-yang polarity, like the yang, the light would be the West, and the yin would be the East, like a polarity. That's what has dominated the world for almost 400 years now. But then now that's going out, and the polarity is gone, and instead, you might say, in a sense, you can say it's the dark age, yes, because a lot of the sort of creative thinking may not be as stimulated as it used to be previously. But on the other hand, you can say that there is some good side to it, because it does seem that the purpose of this, or if you can talk about purpose in this cosmic context, but it does hold the potential for a more of a balance between an East and West, and we will see how it turns out. So, but anyway, the 5 next years, I think will bring about this kind of balance, and it's not necessarily a pretty picture, because people always resist these kind of changes in power structures and so forth. But I think that's really what will happen. And overall, I think there will be a better. There is potential for a better world being happening 5 years from now, but until then, I think there's a lot of hardships that we will have to go through. There's no easy way here. The systems that have dominated the world is sort of collapsing. The ways of thinking, the many aspects of what we call civilization is collapsing, and that I think the next 5 years will be very much dominated with those kind of changes that are brought by this large-scale shift from a peak in the evolution to a valley in the evolution, and it takes some time for these changes to take place.
Mm-hmm. So the next 5 years will be some kind of a balancing act.
Yeah, but a very difficult one, I think. Yeah, and essentially the Western dominance coming to an end. And I'm not saying that is good. I'm not saying that is bad. It's just it will create.
It just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we feel it the same way here in Czech Republic and Europe. I think the sentiment is very much the same. Okay, so I'll translate some of it.
Okay.
Okay, so can we go to the next question, please?
Sure.
Yeah, so we are skipping some, and the next one is, in one of your videos, you spoke about methods that can help us ascend to the 9th wave. Yeah. One of them was the decompartmentalization of the mind.
Okay. Yeah,
it's a hard word to.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
You also suggested that people should discover or develop additional techniques. Both I and many others have found contemplative meditation helpful. I also work with family constellations and integrate various techniques into my therapeutic practice. Exercises inspired by Carlos Castaneda, focused on working with energy and establishing inner silence, have also helped me. I also noticed your recommendation regarding work with the Sri Yantra. Could you inspire us and recommend any other techniques?
Oh, okay. Well, there you have a couple of techniques, and of course, if the 9th wave is about coming to a state of consciousness that is unity, you're able to unite your state of consciousness with other people. If that's the case, then you might say that part of what ways you can prepare yourself for that is to sort of disengage the structure of the mind, and actually then open it up, so to speak, so that it becomes possible to develop stronger resonance with others. And yes, you mentioned a couple of techniques there, and everyone will have to find what they find the most useful themselves. What I certainly do recommend is that people look upon these techniques or their application not just as something for their own enlightenment, which is, that sounds good, but if it only has that individual focus, then that will mean that it doesn't open necessarily up to the ninth wave consciousness. And so what that means is that I think it's important for anybody who has any kind of spiritual leaning to look at whatever practices they are applying to themselves, that they look upon that as a part of the path of humanity, of the direction that it seems that we are meant to go by going through these different 9 levels of consciousness. And now you mentioned a couple of techniques here, and I can comment a little bit on them. For instance, then the Sri Yantra, which is a Hindu concept, really, where you study a kind of a mandala, which has all kinds of very structured geometries that which is similar to our modern minds. Our modern minds really have those kind of structured geometries. But if we want to open ourselves up to to unity, whether we look upon it as unity with a cosmic source or with the unity of others, then we will have to find ways of decompartmentalization of that geometric structures that normally dominates our minds. Okay, so and then you can use the Sri Yantra as they do in India as a tool just for opening up yourself to the cosmic source. Something I also have experience of myself is family constellations, which I think is one of the most important techniques developed in recent times, mostly just actually for healing, because normally we have our traumas that are hidden by these compartments. The traumas, I believe, well, as any memory we have actually will be hidden in some kind of a compartment of the mind, as you can say. And if you can decompartmentalize that, you sort of create an opening that will also create not only a possibility of releasing a trauma, but also for a possibility of creating unity. And I think in that regard, even though the family constellation is quite a personal kind of technique, applying for very individual things, it's a fascinating thing, because it actually does show that we're carrying our entire histories as some kind of a field of around ourselves, and I don't think it has ever become so clear as it has been through the application of these techniques of family constellations. But then you asked, is there some other technique and so forth, and I think what is important a very important thing, which intentionally is about reaching the ninth wave state of consciousness. That is the one that is practiced by the evolutionary collective, and which is basically based in the United States, and it was developed by Patricia Albert, who just a month ago passed away, but is now taken over by two other ladies, Carolyn and Sherry, and they have new plans for how to go forward with this, including how to apply these kind of techniques for organizations, and which sort of opens up for more broader expansion of this kind of practice. And it's really a practice where you can't do it just by yourself. And that's really what really makes it so connected to the ninth wave. It's not just about your own evolution. It is about the shared evolution. And that, I think, is certainly something to consider for anybody who wants to prepare themselves and or even go ahead, so to speak, and be ahead of most people when. But you're not imagined. Yeah. So yeah, I think that answers that question.
Uh-huh. Říkal v podstatě, že budou důležité jako cvičení, které nebudou dělat jednotlivci, ale skupiny spíš, jako že
Tak
are unique, no.
Mm.
Další otázka.
jo, další otázka, že mluvil o tom, že točí film.
Počkej, kdo to je? Kolikátka to je zhruba?
No hnedka následující.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is about the movie. You
okay.
mentioned that you are working on a movie. Could you tell us more about it? Will it be possible to watch it somewhere?
Not yet. I think there is probably 2 months down the line. We now have a first draft of it. And it's what should I say? It's based on as a documentary of my own work, but it's also being created in a much more artistic and beautiful way than I normally present it, because it's that's how it is. Well, it will have. A first section will be about the tree of life. A second section will be about the plumed serpent, which is, is another of those myths, or people perceive them as myths from ancient times. That was practically everywhere. Everywhere people had the idea that there were cosmic serpents, and they also gave special powers to the serpents and so forth. And the plumed serpent is the term used by people in Mesoamerica and even North America. The plumed serpent, and it just means that it's plumed means feathered, basically, with feathers, and meaning that it's some kind of a serpentine movement. In other words, a sine wave kind of movement that goes through the air. And so a second section of the movie will then be about this plumed serpent, which is basically how the tree of life communicates with human beings or any beings there. And then there will be a third section that describes the 9 waves of creation to put a context for the whole of them. And then there will be a 4th section, which really is where it all seems to be going towards, and highlights the 9th wave in this process. But of course, also some of the other waves will be looked upon. So that's kind of what it's about. It's too early to show, even though there's been some small screenings taking place. It's still not ready for that, but we have a first draft of a film of an hour.
Okay. Když bude asi za 2 měsíce, bude na 3 části. První část je Strom života, druhá je nějaká serpentina, nevím přesně.
Opeřený had.
Opeřený had. Jo, a třetí, už nevím. A bude to takový artový spíš film.
A bude možné to vidět?
Sorry. Cat is making some... our cat is making some...
Oh, your cat is there.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the name of your cat?
Sas. It was some...
Sas?
Britská modrá. A
it's a British blue cat and it's called Sas.
Yeah.
Takže Sas.
What does that mean? It's just a name?
Do you know the Anglo Sas?
No.
Ne, řekni je britská modrá.
It's a British cat and the Britons are Anglo Sas.
Yeah. Okay.
A zkráceně Sas.
It's just short for this.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Will there be some...
I love cats. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Will there be some platform where we can see the movie when it is?
There will be, but it's a little bit too early to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, takže bude to pak vidění někde.
Jo.
Okay.
Tak, další otázka. Takže četla jsem vaše knihy velmi záhy.
Jo. So I read your books very early on and expected some kind of effect. However, I noticed that around the beginning of the 9th wave, especially in Europe and within European Union, very strange things began to happen, as if the elites and bureaucracy were deliberately trying to prevent people from noticing that something fundamental was changing. People seem to so overwhelmed that their journey toward their center, toward what Jung called essential self, or toward eating from the tree of life, as described in the Bible, has become almost impossible unless one is retired. Does it also seem to you that this may be intentional or on the part of those who possesses the knowledge and wish to preserve the old world?
Yeah. Well, it may be yes and no, I guess I would say, intentional. You know, there is certainly a number of people today that has enormous resources and powers, and especially money at their disposals, and whether they actually intentionally are trying to suppress a more broader awakening of people with less means, whether they do that or not is not clear. Whether they do that in order to sort of suppress an awakening, but the way that the world is being run, and people today there are people that are trillionaires, I think, or they're getting into that kind of a framework. They make their choices, and they make where they place that, and whether it's intentional or not, I'm sure it will serve to suppress this kind of an awakening. People simply do not have the the means to focus more directly on this kind of spiritual evolution of humanity. There might also be some people that are actually out there doing it intentionally just to create problems of different kinds. But we're not living in a world that sort of supports this kind of changes that we're talking about here. On the contrary, we are living in the world where maybe the most powerful ones are the ones that want basically a status quo. That's as simple as it probably is.
Že není úplně jasný, jestli to je jako intentional, jako záměr, no. Že ti nejvíc bohatí vlastně udržují status quo. No.
Jo.
A bylo tam toho víc, jsem to ti pak přeložil.
Tak a pak tady, jako nebudeme to úplně všechno. Tady, jo, u nás nevyšla kniha. Tady.
Your book Quantum of Science. Anyway. Okay, so your book Quantum Science of Psychedelics has not been published in our country.
Mm-hmm.
I would be very interested in your theory of how the use of psychedelics fits into the Mayan calendar. I have also used psychedelics several times and I saw many remarkable things.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a tree adorned with flowers, but also patterns of luminous crosses arranged in a circle, similar to those painted by Carl Gustav Jung.
Mm-hmm.
Today, during meditation, I saw similar images and symbols like those Jung painted. Did humanity perhaps need to forget the cosmic tree and these ancient symbols for a certain period of time so that psychedelics could later remind us of them again?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Junge. Yes, many questions about that. But, if I start with how I look upon how psychedelics work, before I go into when or where it is being used. Basically, the way I look upon it, the psychedelic substances have a target in cells, in what's called receptor cells. They will especially with serotonin receptors, and as they react with them, there is a structural change in the membranes of the cells, and then that, you might say, is how does this connect to the Mayan calendar? Well, to begin with, I think it's a fact, and it's often repeated, that the most common of all the experiences people have with psychedelics, or at least with the ayahuasca, is the serpents. People see serpents in various forms, and which is really what that implies, to me at least, is that by taking these substances, it means that people are going back to an earlier state of consciousness, which, in terms of Mayan calendrics, it would point to the fifth wave, which is basically the kind of era of going back about 100,000 years, where people were dominated by more of a shamanic state of consciousness. And people then that take ayahuasca, especially, I think, because I think that's the one that is most inclined to bring people back to this earlier state of consciousness. Then people also typically would have experiences of trees of life. And of course, crosses could also, you know, in Christian tradition, the cross is ultimately an expression of the tree of life. And anyway, to come back to then, how could that be? How could it be that a substance like just a common molecule like a DMT or something like that, how could that create such a completely new experience of a world, at least for a couple of hours or so? Well, you know, the way I look upon it is that through the sixth wave, we have downloaded, our minds have downloaded certain geometries, structures that compartmentalized our understanding of reality. This is basically the same time period I'm talking about, from 1617 until our present time, when our mind has been very structured, very geometric. And certain lines, like there is a line that separates the right and the left brain halves, certain lines like that have been dominating our minds and serve to compartmentalize our experience of reality. Now, what happens then if you take this kind of a substance that does react with receptor cells is that the receptors are broken up so that the geometry of the mind is also disengaged, and it doesn't have that kind of a power to exclude influences such as the perception of say serpents or all kinds of experiences, all kinds of visions that people will have with tree of life, with the psychedelics. And so it means that when that structure is being disengaged, the geometric structure of our minds, then we become also more open to influences from these waves, from cosmic waves, as I've been talking about. So, you know, in my understanding of the Mayan calendar with its various waves, these waves are operating all the time, all over the universe and influencing everything. But for the human beings to be more clearly aware of it, it may need to disengage the power of these geometries, and that's what results in the kind of visionary experiences that people have with these kind of substances. There was another question, what's the history here, so to speak? Well, you know, probably in the fifth wave, going back 100,000 years to this shamanic state of consciousness, that was simply the default state of consciousness. That was a normal state of consciousness that people were in. And then came the sixth wave, essentially 5,000 years ago, and even more markedly so the seventh wave in 1755, and really put people under the influence of these structured minds that I describe in my books and so forth. But now we come to a place where those states of consciousness, the structured ones, the geometric ones, are being disengaged through the shifts that I just, I talked about, the shift from prior to 2011 to after 2011. where a structure is actually being disengaged on a large planetary scale. And now then that means that people are much more interested in, and attracted to this as finding states of consciousness that might be supportive to the path towards unity consciousness.
Tak to ti všechno přeložím asi až potom.
Tak dáme poslední otázku a zeptej se, co by mohlo být spolehlivým znamením toho, že se člověk blíží k té 9. vlně. Jenom
Tak.
přelož.
Počkej, to mi musíš tady najít.
Co by mohlo být spolehlivým znamením toho, že se člověk blíží k té 9. vlně?
Okay, so we have a last question. And my mother asks, what could be some guaranteed sign of coming closer to the 9th wave?
Well, it's, today all the waves are running in parallel, and they're all active. They're all influencing us, and if you, and then as Helen knows, at least there is on my website there is this wave form where you can trace and follow and see how things go and so forth. And this is kind of a microcosmic wave because it only has a period of 36 days. So meaning that it is kind of easy to follow for anybody who wants to see what is happening. What I think is happening though is that, there are usually, for a long time I've said that the big scale events are not yet on a geopolitical scale, so to speak, are not yet really in tune with the 9th wave. The reason being that there is a relatively small group of people that are acting and living through that kind of perspective. But I think one thing that you would notice and should notice over time is that the more you see, the greater the power of the 9th wave, the more will the 9th waves with its ups and downs, so to speak, be correlated to events on a global scale. And hopefully, people will also increasingly develop whatever they do, whatever practices, whatever steps they see for themselves that would generate a better world of a common good and so forth, that they could be synchronized increasingly with each other. And that would be the most, and I think it really is, compared to, I've been following this wave, of course, for 15 years or so, and compared to in the beginning, there was very little connection, I would say, between its upturns and its downturns and the events that happened in the world as such. But I think that is increasing. And I think it will continue to increase, and I think that is one of the signs you would see. Yeah, I think that I think that's the only answer I'd like to give at this point.
Okay. Takže jak ta 9. vlna bude jako sílit, tak tím víc lidí jako bude se unite, jako spojovat a to je jeho jako odpověď. No.
Řekni, že děkujeme za rozhovor a že budeme pokračovat, že bych ještě pak požádala o další termín.
Okay, so we're thanking you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
If you want, if we can, I'm gonna translate right now.
Yeah.
And maybe if you want, we can have maybe another session some other time if you are okay with this.
In June, I heard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Červnu.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Takže děkujem, nashledanou.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Have a
Thank
great
you
day.
very much. Take care. Good
Thank
luck.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
A systém se změní. Ano, v tom máte velkou pravdu, protože vy mluvíte o změně mysli, vědomí, o tom něco dělat, studovat a změnit svůj život a ne čekat, že to bude uděláno za vás. Dobře řečeno. Děkuji. Chcete něco říct našim divákům? Mohou vás někde sledovat nebo číst? Třeba váš web? Jo, správně. Můj web je callemanem.com a je tam callemanem.com a je tam mnoho informací, včetně kalkulačky, která ukazuje, kde jste v 9. vlně, ale také informace o mých knihách. Několik mých knih bylo přeloženo do češtiny, včetně mé nejnovější knihy The Living Universe a nevím, jak se jmenovala česky, ale vyšla v roce 2023 a myslím, že v češtině vyšly ještě dvě nebo možná 3 další knížky. Já jsem celkově napsal, myslím, asi 8 různých knih, které vlastně zdůrazňují různé aspekty majského kalendáře, protože majský kalendářní systém má vliv téměř na všechno, co známe. Jo, je to jiný světový názor, který přichází do existence a jeho studiem se objevuje světový názor, v němž existuje nějaký základní plán, časový plán, kde je načasování událostí popsáno tak, že nám pomáhá sladit se změnami, které nám přináší kosmos. Každopádně tak to je a pokud chcete informace, tak někdy píšu newslettery, ne pravidelně, ale občas ano, takže se k nim můžete přihlásit na mém webu a také vlastně někdy pořádám kurzy a jste vítáni se jich zúčastnit. Kurzy se samozřejmě konají v angličtině a myslím, že to je opravdu to, co bych chtěl říct a chci poděkovat Heleně i vám za vedení tohoto skvělého rozhovoru. Myslím, že dopadl dobře a mohli jsme pokrýt dobré otázky, které si jistě klade mnoho lidí. Takže děkuju a já také děkuji a přeji vám mnoho štěstí s vaší prací, studiem a se vším a mějte samozřejmě krásný den. Vy také.
Zanechte prosím komentář a dejte like tomuto videu a pokud nás chcete podpořit, odebírejte naše Hero s nejnižším možným předplatným a nejvyšším množstvím videí navíc.